Presentation. So for those of you that aren't familiar with MDS, I'm going to do a very brief presentation. There will be, typically the Ministry of Agriculture offers a training course at least once a year. We will be offering it again in 2025. Unfortunately, it didn't happen in 2024. The course typically is about a 4 or 5 hour session. There's a lot of material in this book. But we will zero in on a little bit of this today, just a few items that Matt had raised. So the current booklet is publication 853 for minimum distance separation. This came into effect in 2017. Likely it will be updated in the near future. The provincial policy statement was just updated, or it's being updated. So we typically about every 10 years update this document. So stay tuned for that. For anybody that is doing MDS, probably your best bet would be to download a copy of this. It is available on ontario.ca, and it is the implementation guideline booklet here is kind of the Bible when it comes to MDS. It provides you with a lot of the background information and more detail on various parts of it. So please advance the slide, Matt. So it's a land use planning tool. It was developed by the ministry back in the 70s. It's been through various iterations over the years. What does it do? It determines a setback between permanent livestock facilities. So those are barns and or manure storages and or anaerobic digesters now, and other land uses and vice versa. So if there's an existing barn, if someone's trying to build a house or sever a lot nearby, there's also a setback for those people to basically avoid nuisance complaints, nuisance odor complaints. That was what the objective of MDS has been all along, so that we don't get into a lot of Farming and Food Protection Act type situations where people are complaining about the odor. This particular document, it's referenced several places in the provincial policy statement, and it's implemented through the land use planning system. And in turn, MDS is usually incorporated into your local municipal land use planning documents. Okay, next slide, please, Matt. Okay, so what it does not do, it does not deal with land application of manure or digestate. So it's not meant to deal with odor from those things. It relies on fixed point, so permanent structures that require building permits and have the potential to generate long-term incompatibility issues. It's not a fixed distance except for ADs. So we're going to get into this in a second, but they vary according to a number of variables. Okay, next slide, please, Matt. So there's two formulas. So MDS1 and MDS2. MDS1 is for somebody building or rezoning a piece of land near an existing livestock facility. And MDS2 is probably the one most of you consultants are familiar with. So it's a farmer expanding or building a new livestock facility next to some other land use, whether it's a house, a school, some other kind of zoning issue. And the formulas are very similar, except for one factor in each case. So factor A is actually the odor factor associated with a particular livestock type. B is the size factor, so it's based on the nutrient units. D is whether it's solid or liquid manure. And then depending on which formula you're using, E is the encroachment factor. So this is, once again, the type of land use that's being proposed. And C is the expansion factor in MDS2. So if the operation is expanding. Next slide, please, Matt. So as we alluded to earlier, MDS1, it determines the separation distance between proposed new development and dwellings and existing livestock facilities or ADEs. It's applied at the time of official plan amendments, zoning bylaw amendments, lot creation applications, and most recently, building permit applications. So I guess I should have alluded to earlier, MDS is only applied on typically ag zoned or rural zoned land. It does not apply inside settlement boundary areas. It's meant for the rural areas where we're going to have ag buildings. So once you get inside a settlement boundary, we don't apply MDS. It's usually covered by the municipal whatever bylaws, zoning laws, whatever. This is strictly in the rural and the ag zoned areas. MDS 1 is incorporated into the official plans or the comprehensive zoning bylaws in the municipality. Next slide, please, Matt. So basically, when you're looking at this as a schematic, If the pink is a proposed severance, so somebody wanted to sever a lot off of an existing piece of farmland, you'll notice there's setback arcs. So there's, in this particular case, there's 2 barns shown and a manure storage. There will be setback arcs from all of those. And so when you're doing an MDS1 calculation, basically you got to look 360 degrees around where you are, what's out there as far as existing livestock facilities. And ideally, if it's a lot creation, so any of the property boundaries, or if it was a building permit, whatever it is would be outside of all those arcs. So there would be no impact from, or there'd be hopefully no odor complaints going forward from this location because it's far enough away from the existing. Next slide, please, Matt. MDS2, as I said earlier, this is the one you're probably most familiar with. So it's the minimum setback distance between new or altered livestock facilities and anaerobic digesters and existing or approved development, lot lines, and road allowances. MDS2 is always applied at the time of the building permit application. So the trigger for MDS2 is usually the barn building permit application or the manure storage building permit application. It's applicable law under the building code after it's incorporated into the municipal zoning bylaw. So it's one of those things that, just like nutrient management, when you go to get your building permit, they're going to ask you for, the municipality is going to ask for the approved nutrient management strategy, and they're also going to ask you for the MDS setback. And we're going to talk about that in a minute, about who does what, because that was the main premise, I guess, for my talk today. Next slide, please, Matt. So the reverse of what we just showed you for a lot creation, this is the opposite, where someone's trying to build a barn and a manure storage on a piece of property. You'll notice that there's 2 existing land uses shown in the sketch. So there's a house on the property, the brown item, and there's also a church showing, so the red item up at the top. You'll see there's a number of setback arcs. So the orange would be from the manure storage, the blue would be from the barn. And I guess with MDS2, we also include side lot, rear lot, and road allowances. So you'll see there's kind of a dashed in box where the barn and manure storage would be located. These were created, some of it had to do with thinking forward a little bit, that if the barn and the manure storage were right against the property lines, basically you're relying on your neighbor to provide you with most of the setback. So going forward, if someone was trying to build on a neighboring property, that these things could be problematic if they're right up against the property line. The lot line and the road allowance setbacks have been in MDS for 30 plus years. It's not a new concept, but the main issue is usually the existing uses. So the school or the church, the schools, the houses, the other land uses that are out there in the countryside. So next slide, please, Matt. So I guess who does what? So that we, the province, we ensure that the municipalities adopt the MDS into their official plan and comprehensive zoning bylaws. We provide technical support, including training such as today, but the more in-depth training that we usually offer for all municipal staff and consultants. Municipalities, so because MDS is applied at the time of land use planning approval or is given or building permit is issued, they're responsible for making sure it's in their documents. They undertake the calculations or review the calculations provided by an applicant or their consultant for accuracy. And most importantly, they're required to verify the distance, the actual measurement. So when they issue the building permit or they issue that zoning change, that the distances are met. And that could include actually going out to, if they can't do it from aerial photography, if it's very close, it could involve hiring a surveyor or something to verify the distances are met. And if there's problems, it falls to the municipality as far as the distance goes. Consultants, so this is where, if someone like yourselves may be involved, they could undertake the calculations on behalf of the farmer or the applicant. And we'll get into this a little bit. I got a couple examples coming up here. But as far as who does the actual calculations, I know there's, even back in 2017, there was a lot of municipalities that were starting to be leery about doing the calculations in terms of they don't understand agriculture, or they don't understand the difference between different types of agriculture. So they, between a weaner barn versus sow barn versus a dairy barn versus a chicken barn. One of the things we've seen a lot in the last 10 years there is a lot of turnover in those rural municipalities as far as their planners and their building officials go. And so a lot of them are quite new. And if they don't do much with regards to agricultural construction, sometimes they struggle with the identifying the livestock type or the specific type. Next slide, please, Matt. So the next two slides, and we'll just go through them quickly, but these are contained in that current book, 853. These are from, I think, page 7 and 8. These tables were put forward back 10 years ago. And so, like for MDS 1, investigating the surrounding area around a proposed, whatever it is, house building permit application or as rezoning, to look at all the applicable existing livestock facilities and digesters. That could be the municipal staff, or it could be an applicant themselves or the applicant's agent or consultant that does that. Determining the capacity of the livestock, determining the capacity, livestock type, lot size, manure type, manure storage type for each existing livestock facility. Once again, municipal staff could do those calculations, but like I said, even 10 years ago, a lot of them were leery about that because they just didn't understand some of the livestock types or the ag systems. So they were asking the applicant and or their consultant to do this for them. Determining factor E, that is definitely on the municipal staff, and this can be verified with them. So as far as what type of encroachment factor is used, so if it's a simple house, it's the lower of the two. But if it was something like a settlement boundary or a commercial zoning or a school building, like a severance for a school or a church, it's typically the higher encroachment factor. There'd be more people there to smell any odors, so a higher odor factor, higher potential for odor complaints. So they would use the higher one, but the municipal staff would verify that one. The actual performance of the MDS calculation. So once again, municipal staff could do it, but quite often now they're asking the applicant or their agent or consultant to do the calculation. I guess we will talk about the AgriSuite software in a second. But the layout is, or not the layout, but the drop-down menus we use in MDS or the MDS tools is very similar to what we use in the nutrient management, or it's almost identical to what's in the nutrient management strategy and plan as far as primary livestock type, subtype groupings. We use more or less the same. There's one or two that I'm going to talk about in a second that are slightly different in MDS, but by and large, if you look in the two, if you look at, say, beef cows or beef, and then your options are, cow calf or feeders or backgrounders or short keeps, the drop-down menus are identical. Same on dairy, horses, most of the species. There's one or two exceptions. We'll talk about that in a second. Step 5 in MDS 1, confirm all information used in the calculation is reasonable and reflects that's on the municipal staff. And like I said, verifying the actual distances are met is on the municipal staff. And then as far as the approvals go, it's the staff and or the council that would do it for MDS 1. Next slide, please, Matt. MDS 2, it's basically the same thing. Like the consultant part would be the first step 1, and step 3 would be potential areas where it could be the municipal staff or it could be the applicant or the applicant's agent or consultant that does the calculation. Those would be the ones where you could become involved. But once again, confirming and verifying the distances is all on the municipal staff. I guess you have the ability to check via it's like aerial photograph, or use something like Ag Maps. If you develop a map in Ag Maps, you'll see there's an option for MDS in there. It's quite a useful tool that can be used as well. So if you know what the setback distance is from, say, the neighbor's house, you can easily punch that into Ag Maps and it will generate the arc and you can see it roughly. But it's only a double check. Like it's not the actual verification that would fall to the municipal staff. Next slide, please, Matt. So I'm going to talk about MDS 2 first, and then I'll come back to MDS 1. But if you are doing MDS 2 calculations, I guess this is the information that you need to verify, I guess, if you're doing the calculation. And I guess the first one I highlighted it because I typically get a lot of the calls from the municipal folks and or consultants when they're doing MDS. And I guess my word of advice to any consultant that's doing these MDS2 calculations. Ensure the information used in the MDS calculation reflects the information submitted in the nutrient management document. So I guess with MDS2, there's the, livestock housed on the property before the construction. So what was there before they built the new barn, or they expanded the barn, or they built the new storage? And then what was the livestock number after the project? Like, what's the estimated livestock number after the project's there? And usually when I get questions from municipal folks, if the nutrient management strategy, for example, says there's at the end of the project, there's going to be 150 dairy cows, I would expect the number in the MDS document to also show the final number to be 150 dairy cows. If for some reason it says 100 or 120 or 190, some other number, that's usually when we get calls, because they're suspicious that something's not right or something doesn't match. And that's usually when we get the calls, or I get the calls anyways. The other information that you're going to need when you're doing an MDS2 calculation, so they're going to ask you about building permits for livestock housing or manure storage in the past 3 years. This has to do with how the software interprets the expansion factor. Basically, for something to be considered existing in MDS, it has to have been there for at least 3 years. If it's newer than that, basically it treats the expansion as whatever was issued in the last year or two, plus the current application. It treats it all as new. But if it's been there longer than 3 years, MDS considers it existing, and you get some benefit in the expansion factor as far as a reduction. You need the total livestock housing or manure storage capacity on the property before the construction and after the construction. What type of manure storage is going to be there? So whether it's solid or liquid, or you've got both, what's being built. And finally, and similar to what you guys go through with nutrient management, so MDS generates an estimated barn size as well. And those, once again, are simply an estimate, but if there's a huge deviation in the numbers from what the municipality is looking at, as far as, the building is 10,000 square feet and MDS or nutrient management is saying, the estimated barn size, let's say, is 7,000 square feet, they usually ask questions. But if there's an explanation that goes along with one, then I would use this. Like, if you use this, whatever you use for your explanation for nutrient management, I would use the same in MDS. If things are consistent, usually the project should move ahead. I mean, I can't speak for their approvals because we're not doing it the province, but usually if those things are consistent, things go along a lot better. Next slide, please, Matt. Okay, so I guess when I said there was a couple differences between the drop-down menus in each tool, there is one significant difference that came to mind, and I actually thought of another one afterwards. But you'll notice in MDS there is an option for imported manure. So back in 2017, we added this option. So if a farmer was looking to build, let's say, a remote manure storage on a bare piece of land that they own, let's say a couple miles or kilometers from their existing facilities, previously we didn't have a good method for applying MDS to that. So we added the option of imported manure in the most recent software update and book update. And it's based on the volume. So for this particular thing, so if someone wanted to build a liquid storage on that property, the MDS tool, you basically input the volume of the storage. So if it's 10,000 cubic feet or 5,000 cubic meters or whatever it is, the software will generate a factor B based on a volume. So 19.8 cubic meters or 700 cubic feet is the equivalent of one nutrient unit for this purpose. And whatever the total volume of that storage is, it'll generate a nutrient unit. It inputs a factor A and a factor D, so whether it's solid or liquid. And typically these are new, and like there's nothing else on the property. So factor C is automatically 1.14, and it calculates a setback for those. Liquid is straightforward. For solid storages, if someone was going to do this, so these would generate a building permit, and they'd be a permanent structure. For solid manure storage, typically we're looking at it like a three-sided, it has to have at least 2 walls and a floor on it. Ideally, it would have 3 walls, so something like a little bunker silo. There's some of these out there in the countryside, but the same methodology would apply, and it would generate a setback for that. The one other difference, that came to mind just before I get to the next one, The one other difference that came to mind would be broiler chickens. So in MDS, it asks you for the housing area. So it doesn't ask you for bird numbers. This change was made back in 2017, and it was at the request of municipalities because there was a lot of confusion with people changing the numbers, changing the grow cycles and whatever. So we simplified it to square footage. We used the nutrient unit per square foot for broilers, and so it's the one livestock type that is slightly different between MDS and nutrient management. The other ones, I guess they're all the same as far as I remember. I can't remember any other ones that would be different, but it simplified it. So we have a couple examples. So if someone that hasn't done MDS before, I guess you could take the training. We have about 10 canned examples with solutions that we can share with you if you want to practice. But it's like nutrient management, I guess, in terms of the software. I guess playing around with it a little bit is the best way to kind of learn it, how it works and stuff. But this was one of the examples. This was the MDS2 example where a farmer wanted to build 2 barns on a bare piece of land. And basically the arrows are showing the setback distances that would be required to be generated from an existing house. So one from each barn and one from the external manure storage. Next slide, please, Matt. MDS1 is a little trickier, and I've had a few nutrient management consultants call me on these in the last year. I guess where these differ from the MDS2 ones are a little more straightforward because typically you're doing it for your client who is the farmer, and the information is all readily available as far as what the livestock were housed on property before and what they're going to be afterwards. You're quite familiar with that because they've been telling you what they're proposing to build. When it comes to MDS1, sometimes getting the information is a little harder to come by. Like I said, you're looking at all livestock facilities, usually within 500 to 1,000 meters of the proposed development. So it's trying to track down the ownership in some cases, the lot sizes, and then the type of livestock facilities on each property. It can be a little more involved. Housing capacity as well, manure storages, and then even reviewing the estimated barn sizes to confirm if the design capacity is reasonable. It's one of those ones. It's a little harder to come by sometimes. Oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes, the farmers may be reluctant to share that information. Ideally, you should be getting it directly from the neighbor, like you would find whoever the farm owner is and ask them these questions. Sometimes they're not real keen on, if they find out someone wants to build a house in their neighborhood, they may not be as willing to share. That's my experience with it. And sometimes it's hard to track down that information. Next slide, please, Matt. Okay, this is just another one of the canned examples, just showing that someone wants to build a house on a bare 100 acres, and there's a couple existing farms around them. These even could be their family members on these other farms, which in this case should be fairly easy to get the information from. But it just shows that it's not one calculation. It could be multiple calculations depending on what is out there around this location. And next slide, please, Matt. Yeah, and this is another one of the guidelines out of the book. So there's something in MDS1. So if it's an existing livestock facility, and it doesn't even have to be occupied, as long as it's structurally sound and reasonably capable of housing livestock. So it could be a bank barn that had cattle in it 20 years ago. If the thing is still standing and it's in reasonably good shape, structurally it's in good shape, and apart from maybe changing some penning or changing some of the stabling or something inside of it, you could put livestock back in it. MDS gives it consideration, and so I guess trying to get an estimate on that is sometimes can be problematic, especially if the ownership, and we've had cases where the owners may not even live in Canada. They might be foreign owners that have bought this property. Tracking that down is sometimes difficult. In 2017, we added guideline 20 to the book. And this is, if you're unable to, if you are unable to track down the information, we give you an option or an out. So based on the square footage of the building, there's a method. You can pick unoccupied livestock barn, and there's a method in there where you put in the square footage, and it'll generate a factor B. We use some conservative values for factor A and D, as far as we assume solid manure system, and we assume a factor A of 1, and it will generate a setback for those. Next slide, please, Matt. Okay, so I just saw one of the questions pop up about structurally sound. There is also in that guideline, it talks about the unoccupied livestock barns. You may not have to do this setback if one of the following is true. So if it was deemed by a municipal building official or even an engineer, if a private engineer was to deem it to be, no longer structurally sound or reasonably capable, the classic example would be, from the front it looks pretty good, but if you can see around the side of the building, and we've had cases where the back wall is kind of fallen out, or say part of the roof is missing, or something obvious that it's in bad shape. We had one case, I know they sent me a picture of one that was like an old chicken barn with a tree growing through part of it, and it was like, okay, I don't think you're going to put animals back in this building. It's obviously in bad shape. If something like that is available or is deemed, you wouldn't have to do the MDS for that particular location. If a portion of the lot has been zoned for something else, that they're not allowed to keep livestock in it any longer, or like they're not allowed to house livestock on that property, that would be another one. If there's some kind of municipal zoning or something on the property, that would be one. The other one that's in there is if the unoccupied livestock barn is less than 100 square meters, you don't have to worry about it. If it's, if it was a little shed or something previously, those would disqualify it as well. But otherwise, if it was, if it's a bank barn and it's in reasonably good shape, typically those ones do come into play. And so, like I said, it makes it a little trickier. The MDS 1 is a little trickier than MDS 2, just because it's not just one calculation. In this case, it could be multiple calculations depending where you are in the province and what's around this. If your client is the neighbor that wants to, let's say, build a new house on his 50 or 100 acre property, or they want to sever a lot, or you could be dealing with multiple setback calculations, because if his neighbors have got livestock operations around them, they may have to do more than one calculation. Next slide, please, Matt. And the last one is just around measurement. So where are they measured? So once again, guideline 40 in the document is quite specific for both MDS 1 and MDS 2. It gives you good advice as far as where you measure from and what you measure, what you measure to. So MDS 1 setbacks, it's the shortest distance between the area proposed to be rezoned or redesignated and the surrounding livestock barns. Manure storage is the ADs. For building permits, it's the shortest distance between the proposed dwelling and the same three things. And once again, it was mentioned earlier in the nutrient management talk. When we do measurements from livestock barns, it's from the livestock occupied portion of the barn. Places where there's going to be, accumulation or storage of manure, we do not include. And in MDS, there's guidelines specific to this where they talk some more detail. But for a dairy barn, we typically don't measure from the milk house or the milking parlor. If it was a horse operation and they have a riding arena, we don't measure from those. We don't measure from loading ramps, silos, feed rooms. It's quite specific. It goes into more detail. And I think that's it. Is there another slide, Matt? Oh, sorry. Yeah, and MDS 2, I guess, once again, it's the shortest distance from the sorry, get my tongue twisted here. So MDS 2, it's measured as the shortest distance from the point of new construction for the livestock occupied portion of the barn, manure storage, or anaerobic digester, and the dwelling, or the area zoned or designated to permit non-agricultural uses. So basically what that is saying is, so if you have an existing barn on the property and you're adding on to it, or you're building a new barn beside it, but we'll go with the adding on one, you measure from the point of the new construction. So the existing barn may not meet the setback. Like if it's been there for however many years, we measure from the start of the new construction what the building permit is currently for, and that's the one where you check for the arc. Same thing, we don't include milking centers, feed rooms, those kind of things, and it's quite specific. Guideline 3 talks, or section 3 talks about livestock occupied portions and provides a lot of detail. One more, please, Matt. I think we're just about to the end of this thing. Yes, questions.
And it looks like there are a couple questions in the chat. Can you see those?
Yeah, I can pull them up. The structurally sound, like I said, it could be the municipal official, it could be a private engineer. If like I said, if it's obvious, if something's falling down, it could be anybody basically. The second question around changes to MDS if the barn or manure storage is unoccupied for a certain period of time. It may come up in the next go around and as far as discussions. At the moment, we don't have a time limit on these things. It's been discussed in the past. I can't say that it went very far, but maybe this time around it will be different. I don't know if that answers your question, Hugh, but we, like I said, we're almost due for an update, and I know some of our land use planners have been keeping a list of suggestions and comments over the last number of years that we've received from various people, users, consultants, municipalities, things that they questioned. So I suspect when we do get around to updating it next, we will probably pull all those out and go through them again, and the ones that have merit will probably see some changes. But I don't, at this point, I can't say we're changing anything at this point, but likely it will come up for discussion if there is issues like that. Like I said, the guidelines, if you're looking for information on MDS, if you don't already have a copy, I would download a copy. And like I said, it's a very good resource. And if that doesn't do it for you, you're certainly welcome to either give myself a call or even some of our land use planners, and we will certainly try to help you out where we can.
There's one more question. Who is responsible for educating building officials that wrongly interpret the guideline?
Well, I guess we offer the same technical resources to everybody, whether it's consultants or municipalities or whoever. We are scheduled to offer a training course in the next couple months. Unfortunately, our provincial election earlier this spring delayed when we were going to push out the dates, but I believe now we're looking at probably May or June, and there will be an invite go out to all the municipalities in Ontario, and they're certainly welcome to take the course. Like I said, we're available if they have technical questions to give us a call, but I guess the ministry doesn't. We're a technical resource. We're not we're not like a formal board or somebody that rules one way or the other on these things. We're here to provide the technical resources. Like I guess if there's any challenges, there's the Ontario Land Tribunal that they would take it to if there was something that was challenged. But
so Dan brings up a really good point there, and I guess if I'm allowed to, director under the act pet peeves here, one of my big ones is something happens in when I'm talking to a municipality, they said, well, you guys approved the strategy, so we didn't care. We figured it was all your stuff. I'm like, no, MDS and the strategy are two different things, right? So make sure you have your MDS stuff, right? Like as the director signing a strategy, I'm not there doing those I don't see any of that stuff. I'm not part of that stuff. So just because you have a strategy approval does by no means mean that you have all your MDS is done or approved or anything like that. Sorry, just putting in that plug.
That's good. You mentioned these courses, Dan. Are these, would these be relevant for consultants to take? And if so, how do they did they just call you to sign up for when they, for the next one?
Well, they can call me. We will be advertising them shortly. Once we know the dates, we'll be pushing it out. We will probably push it out. I believe in years past, we've offered it to nutrient management consultants and anybody else that wanted to take them. They're free. The last since COVID, they've been online. Similar to this, they've been like a Teams call or a Zooms call, where we offer the training material. I know there's been some discussion this year, and they haven't been finalized yet, but whether we'd offer 2 courses, one a more general, for newcomers versus somebody that's already taken it before. We might do a little bit more of a streamlined, these are the common things we see or common problems we hear about. You may, if you've been doing MDS for a while, you may not care about factor A, factor C, what it means, and all those kind of discussions. But we haven't finalized the dates and how we're going to do the course yet. But it likely we will be pushing something up very shortly because it is overdue, and we can reach out and get a list from you, Janet, or even from our nutrient management folks as far as the consultants, and let you know when the dates are and try and make this happen.
That would be great, Dan. If you get something set up, I have the method to notify all of the consultants and NASM plan develop. I guess it was just consultants that are building things. I have the ability to contact them all and let them know. So if you give me the details, I'll push out that information.
Okay. I see there's one more question about minor variances. I guess minor variances is an option as far as if you can't meet the setback. And one of the options that a farmer or whoever could do is apply for a minor variance. It's strictly a municipal process, like they have their land committee adjustment. Historically, the ministry we'd often get asked for comments. We have not been providing comments I'm going to say in the recent past, say the last 10 years. I've been with the ministry for 25 years, and I think in that period, I think I've written comments for maybe 2, and they were very specific cases. So normally we will provide technical advice, but we don't usually wade in with opinions on minor variances, and that's been pretty consistent for the last 10 years. Like I said, we do allow the option. I believe it's guideline 43 talks about minor variances and the reason why they could be allowed if the farm, for example, is caught between a rock and a hard place where they can't really meet the distance because of some physical feature or whatever. It is an option, but we don't usually wade into those. Like I said, if the municipality wants to go with them, like allow it, we certainly we leave that. It's their decision, so we leave that to them to make the decision ultimately.
Okay. There's one other comment. There's a lot of new upgrades to laying hen operations to make manure much drier than in the past.
Yeah, and thank you, Jeff. It's on our list of things when we get to the updates. That is one area that we have talked about possibly changing it to reflect other poultry operations, because you're right, the hen systems have changed a lot in the last 15, 20 years. Historically, hens, we gave them quite a rough time from an odor perspective, but back in those days we had a lot of liquid and semi-solid systems. But it has changed, and it is one of the options whenever we do get around to updating the booklet. It is something that's been definitely identified for discussion and possible changes. So hopefully we will get direction about starting this review and update in the next little bit, but time will tell.